welcome to Season 12, Episode 17 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading Allan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind, this time reading and discussing half of the last chapter here in this book, titled The Student in the University. So this is really just a summary chapter, right? Where do we stand now? Where have all these sort of trends led? What is the point that we're at now? And I thought this was, along with the last one, I think a couple of the best chapters in this book. I think part of that's just him tying everything together. But I think his assessments of sort of the different branches of the university, I think are really good about their reaction to sort of these political, movements in the university and what that means for students and everything like that. I thought it was a really good chapter, at least half of it that we've read.
Yes, good chapter. And it looked like you had like a small child holding up your microphone, wiggling away.
Oh yeah, my stand is like kind of precariously balanced on itself, so it doesn't really. I got it like leaned up against my desk here. So if you hear a loud crash, it's just my microphone falling over.
It's ridiculous. All right, we gotta get you a new mic stand. This one really kind of hit home for me because you have your youngest brother is about to go off to college, and he's more undecided than any of you all, his three older brothers, and so then it's like, what's the point, of this university? How do you select, a study, a field of study, right. and this, and the author analyzes, what is the point of the university, and is it really just a technical school, for you to train for a job or a career,
right?
And discusses all those things that really we're wrestling with now, because
right.
And it's especially difficult for high achieving students. I don't know if I probably mentioned this. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but if you get in high schools now, if you're a high achieving student, you have a lot of college credits already out of the block. So almost all of your what we call prerequisites, like all those he describes them in here. We'll get to it, I'm sure. Where you have a sampling of various fields of study that are required of you: history and foreign language and math.
Right.
And then you have your specialty classes. Well, if you're a high achieving student in high school, you'll have all those done
right
before you even get to college. And so that leaves your actual field of study. And so then the question is, okay, do you want to take general studies courses, or do you want to pursue just your individual career field? And I think it's kind of an interesting dilemma,
right?
Trying to figure out what's the most efficient thing. And of course, I want you all out of school, and living a productive life.
You failed on that front.
So far, somebody's going to graduate next year. 2 out of the 3, 2 out of the 4, I mean. And looking forward to that. That's good. I just want success for my sons, and that's really what I'm saying.
Right.
And study is important, but you get moving.
Right.
Get your career going. Anyway, so this was a interesting, and I thought provoking and timely chapter for me, trying to help guide my youngest in college, and I really don't know. I'm really struggling with myself.
Yeah, I really like the way he starts, because his first section of the two that we'll read in this chapter is just liberal education. And so the first sentence is here. He says, "What image does a first-ranked college or university present today to a teenager leaving home for the first time, off to the adventure of a liberal education? He has 4 years of freedom to discover himself, a space between the intellectual wasteland he has left behind and the inevitable dreary professional training that awaits him after the baccalaureate." It's interesting, like the university presents itself as like this opening, this sort of ideal of a higher life. Then he goes on, he says, "But the university offers no distinctive visage to the young person. He finds a democracy of the disciplines, which are there either because they're autochthonous or because they wandered in recently to perform some job that was demanded of the university. The democracy is really an anarchy because there are no recognized rules for citizenship and no legitimate titles to rule. In short, there is no vision, nor is there a set of competing visions of what an educated human being is."
Yes.
So it's like there's no purpose to this sort of liberal education we've set up. And there's not even a competing set of purposes, right? There's not enough people who are passionate about what a liberal education ought to be that there's even a debate happening. It's just kind of, you come in, everything's presented as an even sort of level playing field, and you just do whatever you want. And it's just sort of an anarchy, right? You don't have really any sense at major universities of what the university itself is for. It's just this randomly assorted, group of departments and courses that are offered, some required for somewhat random reasons, and
Hmm.
that's what the education is.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've now been to a number of orientations and tours
Hmm.
of colleges over the years. That, of course, have changed a lot. Um, where they're getting starting to get back to basics a little bit, which is encouraging because when your next youngest brother was going off to college, it was the craziest.
Right.
This was COVID times, or
Hmm.
just post-COVID times, and they had waived all sort of
Yeah.
academic requirements
Yeah.
even to get into school.
Yeah, because I was touring what would have been 21, really, 20 and 21, at any schools that would let you actually take in-person tours, because some of them weren't even when I was, in the period of time when I would have been taking tours.
Right.
So that was a weird time too, but then after sort of the dust settled, then a lot of the craziness with the next one.
Well, I remember when you went into they had like an orientation thing in the summer. It was we went up there for that, and
Right.
they said they banned more than one parent to go with you or one adult
Yeah.
or something. So we both went up there anyway,
Hmm.
and I ended up working in the library. They had masks everywhere, and
Right.
God, just so anyway, getting off on that thing. I don't want to
Don't
get
dwell on it.
but they they all paid this lip service to
Mm.
the making you a more well-rounded individual, but it's really just lip service
Right.
because it's really just, well, that's what our prerequisites are. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the other thing, but they never espouse any sort of real philosophy or theory behind
Right.
it. And really what they're pushing, the thing that they talk most about in tours, anybody who hasn't been on a lot of college tours, number one is all the help you're going to get as a student, all the
Mhm.
tutoring.
Yeah.
Everyone is like, I felt like I was dropping you guys off at daycare.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're going to have this help and this
Mhm.
tutoring, and they have tutor labs and writing labs and resume labs and all this. I
Yeah.
mean, that's great. But I'm thinking, well, what are you doing in the classroom? I mean, how bad of teachers are you? They have
Yeah.
to have all this freaking tutoring
Right.
and free classes and free writing. Anyway, and the other thing are the clubs.
Hmm.
Well, I am happy to report that for the first time since what year did Sam go?
That'd have been 2018.
Yeah, so we would have been touring in 2017, 2018. The first time I did not have to suffer through a reference to a Quidditch club. Every time at
Yep.
every school that we visited, they mentioned, oh, we have 5,000 clubs,
Hmm.
things. Listen, you can form your own club. You just have to have four people or more and a faculty advisor, stupid enough to sign up on it. And we even have a Quidditch club.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's now, and it's like, I've never seen one. Have you ever seen a Quidditch match?
I haven't. I heard stories of at
I
my
feel
undergrad.
I feel like
Um,
I've missed an opportunity
no.
to not see it live when it existed in the wild,
Hmm.
because it must be the most absurd thing in the world with these people running around a field with a
Hmm.
broomstick between their legs, throwing balls at each other or
Yeah.
something.
I heard
And
at my undergrad, I think they disbanded just before I joined, not a Quidditch club, but like an actual, like the live action role players, the
uh,
LARPers. Have you heard of that? Like people who dress up in like,
yeah,
armor and fake swords. And I was told it was one of the greatest spectacles you could see on the campus because they would literally just line up on opposite ends of the quad and then
yeah.
just run at each other
Oh, now
and
that
just
would
like
be actually
whack each other with swords. And I'm like,
yeah.
that actually sounds really fun to watch. I was kind of sad that they had disbanded by the time I got there.
Oh, yeah. Well, we went to they had a Viking festival a couple weekends
Mm-hmm.
ago, and so I took your two younger brothers to that, and that was pretty funny.
Right.
But they had like real metal swords, and they got hurt. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, but I like what
so
he says because after
but
that, his descriptions here, he says, out of chaos emerges dispiritedness because it is impossible to make a reasonable choice, right? Talking about this sort of anarchy that exists. He says, better to give up on liberal education, get on with a specialty in which there is at least a prescribed curriculum and a prospective career. The student
yes,
gets no intimation that great mysteries might be revealed to him, that new and higher motives of action might be discovered within him, that a different and more human way of life could be harmoniously constructed by what he is going to learn. That's
yes,
exactly right, because you just don't get any sense, like at these, tours or anything like that, of like, well, here's what the university is for. Here's sort of what you can learn. Here's sort of what you can do. It's like, here's all of the extracurriculars. Here's, like you said, all this tutoring help, these counseling services. And it's more about this this sort of like easy transition into like this comfortable student life where you can just kind of do whatever you want and the education doesn't really have a purpose. You don't hear any discussions about that.
Yeah. And well, I'm afraid that if they actually did articulate their educational philosophy, there would be a revolt by the parents,
Yeah,
because their educational philosophy is anti conservative,
right,
anti-American a lot of times, and so I think they're afraid to articulate that.
right.
And the other thing is all the blue light things, like
Hmm.
the security stuff. And I even asked which tour I was on. I think it was with Jonah. Of course, he was mortified. And we have these alarm things. And if anybody doesn't know, every one of these campuses all across the country, I guess there must have been some federal grants or something.
Hmm.
They have these emergency phones, and they have big blue lights on the top of them. So it's like the old style phone booths, except it's just a pole with some sort of receiver on it.
Yeah, you
So
just
you
press a
press the
big red
button,
button, it calls the
yeah,
university police department.
the police, and they respond, in a panic,
Hmm.
and they have them like every 100 feet or something.
Yeah, they're all
And
over the place on any
and
campus.
and I'm thinking, I asked one of them. I said, "How many people are raped on this campus? You have to have a pole every 100 yards. What is going on? What are your crime stats? I mean, my God,
Yeah.
that was not well received.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I mean, what is that all about? So it's safety, and then like we're at we just toured Mizzou.
Hmm.
I think I mentioned this. We didn't. Maybe I mentioned it offline, but they didn't make it as big of a deal about the racial studies and the
Hmm.
LGBT. They said, well, this is here in the student union. I don't know why they have their own space in the student union as opposed to anybody else, but okay, fine. And then we spent like 10 minutes outside of the whatever it is, the sexual assault counseling group or whatever. I forget what the acronym was. And I didn't mention, I didn't ask. I'm like, how many? I was really close to saying how many people are sexually assaulted out here
Yeah.
that you have to have a permanent office in the student union, and
Hmm.
everybody can go in there and talk about it. I mean, what is going on with your campus if you need those services?
Right.
And this is in addition to the police department. I mean, really, shouldn't they just go to the police department?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's really the focus.
Hmm.
And so anyway, the point of the author is like this anarchy exists where
Hmm.
they don't have a focus on what the heck are they, what's their mission?
Right.
They don't even know what their philosophy is.
Right.
And it's just as the author says, they democratize the studies. And so you have all these different programs, and you have unlimited options,
Hmm.
no structure.
Yeah.
And he says, like on page 33, 38, like this quote, he says, but nothing was done to guide or inform their energy, this is students. And the result was merely to add multi-lifestyles
Right.
to multi-disciplines, the diversity of perversity to the diversity of specialization.
Hmm.
It's so true. It's like, oh, you can learn about this, you can learn about that, but it's not about anything worth knowing. It's about what other people are doing,
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I like what he says on 339 too, where he talks about the professors a little bit, and so many of them are specialists. So many of them don't care about the overall purpose of the university. He says of the professors, he says if they've been entirely emancipated from the old structure of the university, which at least helped to indicate that they are incomplete, only parts of an unexamined and undiscovered whole. So the
Mhm.
student must navigate among a collection of carnival barkers, each trying to lure him into a particular sideshow.
Yeah.
This undecided student is an embarrassment to most universities because he seems to be saying, I am a whole human being. Help me to form myself in my wholeness and let me develop my real potential. And he is the one to whom they have nothing to say. I
Yes.
think that's really true. And
100%.
kind of on the page before, we were talking about the dispiritedness. I think that's absolutely true about a lot of students, who come out of high school and it's like, still, college is held up as this place where you discover a lot about everything, right? It's the university, it's supposed to be that universal education. You go there and it's just, okay, well, you have to take statistics one. Why do I have to take statistics one? Well, it's part of the liberal education. Okay, well, what's the liberal education for? Well, it's just to
Uh,
help you learn a bunch of different things.
yeah.
And it's
Right.
like, well, okay, well, what am I doing with that? What purpose does that have? And it's just like, a lot of people in college, I'd say probably the majority of people in college are just like, well, I'm just going through the steps, right?
Yeah.
After that first year, it's just like, well, okay, I guess I'm here now. Guess I should stick it out. And it's just completely dispirited, right? And you'll have one
Yeah.
or two really good classes and really good professors, and you'll really enjoy those one or two classes and one or two professors. And the rest of the time, you're like, why am I here? You know?
Well, and the only justification I've heard about what used to be the liberal arts instruction is that, well, you're going to need to know all these other things to advance your career. You know,
Right.
you need to know about American history because it may come up in some meeting. You don't want to not
Hmm.
know, which came first, the Revolutionary War or the Civil War.
Hmm.
Uh, I know, granted, you should know that well before you're graduating from
Right.
high school, but that's a whole different problem. And I think when you look at like all the courses and all the fields of study that you can do, you can pursue, and the universities aren't. It's like they keep expanding degree programs and adding on studies this and studies that or different subcategories. What was it we were looking at? We went to the engineering school and toured that, and there were so many sub engineering
Hmm.
degrees within engineering, and then like they have a nuclear reactor at Mizzou, and so you can get a nuclear engineering, but it's not a degree. I think it's some subcategory or whatever. But you can get a degree in nuclear engineering. But they have all these different subcategories of everything. But anyway, he mentions this quote I like on 339. The net effect of the student's encounter with the college catalog is bewilderment and often demoralization.
Hmm.
You see so much, it's too much
Right.
uh, to even pick from, and I fear that none of it is very good.
Hmm.
Like there might be, it's almost like the colleges should be more specialized.
Yeah.
The argument that, well, it's a practical benefit to do take these other classes. Well, then fine. Then if it's all about career advancement, then you damn well should have accelerated courses. I
Hmm.
mean, let's get these people to work. If
Yeah.
that's all it is, it's a technical school
Hmm.
university, then you should really focus on that. You should
Right.
you should be there's a ranking college that's like for automotive and skilled labor type
Mm-hmm.
college up in St. Louis, which is very effective. And there's another one, what is it, Missouri? It's out in the Ozark area.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Ozark Technical.
yeah, that's supposed to
Yeah.
be even better. And if you're going to do that, but with college degrees, like a business degree, then
Right.
do it, own it.
Right.
And then the philosophy is, we want you to be the best businessman in the world, or we want you to be the best professional degreed person in the in your field or whatever. But it's like
Hmm.
they don't even know what they want to do as a
Right.
university.
Right. And it's entirely self-defeating. I know I think I've
Yes,
told this on the podcast before, but at the public liberal arts school that I went to for undergrad, you'd have all kinds of speeches from the administration about the importance of liberal arts education, but they always just boiled down to, well, having stats looks really good on your resume and you'll be able to be
yes,
hired much quicker. And,
right,
our students make slightly more than students from this other comparable university. And it's like, well, that's not the purpose of a liberal arts education. And if you're
right.
just going down the path of, well, we do these things because they're practical, at some point they're just not practical anymore, right?
Yes,
You need to
right.
find a different reason to argue for them to have a liberal arts education. It's in some ways that you're purposefully not doing practical things, right? That the hands-on monetary things, right? The liberal arts education should be about, the formation of the whole person, which is
Right.
not a very practical thing that you can measure in terms of the money that you make and whether or not you'll be hired by this one firm, after you graduate. But it's like if you keep arguing down the practical path, then there's no reason for you to exist as a university at all, right? You should
Yeah,
just tell all your students to go to a trade school or to a
yeah.
technical school.
And he mentions something that drives me crazy
Hmm.
about undergrad and about law school in particular. Maybe other graduate schools are different, but he says on 340, a well-kept secret. He says Cornell. He's talking about Cornell, where he was a professor. The Cornell plan dared not to state the radical truth. A well-kept secret. The colleges do not have enough to teach their students, not enough to justify keeping them 4 years, probably not even 3 years.
Hmm.
I knew that back in the 1980s.
Right.
And in law school, my God, what a waste of time. 3 years to
Right.
learn what?
Hmm.
That is a 1 year program at best.
Hmm.
And it's really, I knew this at the time, and I'm firmly convinced it's the case. It is just an artificial restraint on labor within the legal field because we're trying to limit competition. It's a
Hmm.
hazing. You have to go through 3 years post undergrad, and then you have to take a test
Hmm.
to prove your proficiency, and then we'll let you in the club.
Right.
It's insane. And then you meet the grads
Hmm.
that have done all that and have passed the test, and you're like, you're really stupid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, you can't even figure out anything. I mean,
Hmm.
you have to give them directions to the courthouse.
Yeah.
You know, they literally have no idea what they're doing,
Right.
and that's okay because we'll do the on the job training. But shoot, why don't I do the on the job training for an 18-year-old right out of high school?
Hmm.
You know, or at least an undergrad. Why can't you get a law degree in undergrad? You
Hmm.
know, I mean, I see no reason. There's no
Right.
reason to have 2 degrees,
Right.
maybe 1 year past post grad. But anyway,
Right.
so I'm
Yeah.
100% with this guy.
I like what he says a little bit lower on 340. We're talking about this like specialization. He says the so-called knowledge explosion and increasing specialization have not filled up the college years, but emptied them. Right? There's
Yeah,
just not enough to teach. And he says a little later on, he says these great universities, which can split the atom, find cures for the most terrible diseases, conduct surveys of whole populations, and produce massive dictionaries of lost languages, cannot generate a modest program of general education for undergraduate students.
yeah,
This is a parable for our times. And he
yeah,
says, of course, then all the attempts to sort of fill this vacuum are what he says, just various kinds of fancy packaging of what is already there, right? These sort of interdisciplinary programs. You make your own major. You're just taking classes from different departments that are already offered, study abroad, that sort of thing. He says, then there are black studies and women's or gender studies, along with, he has this in capitals, learn another culture. Like that is
yep,
just the class itself, right? And you don't really get a sense of, well, why am I learning this other culture? Well, it's just to fill out your time at the university, right?
yep,
You've got to get some sort of humanities credit or something. And so these are the courses that are offered. I like his thoughts too. He's kind of early to this, but the latest item is computer literacy,
yeah,
full
right.
cheapness of which is evident only to those who think a bit about what literacy might mean. Right? He says we should really be promoting literacy, so that people are literate in what literacy means, because
Right.
so many high school graduates just don't even know what it means to be literate and to read the great books and things like that. And he says it's just filling empty space, right? Because you have to keep them there for 4 years, and that's about it.
Well, and I think, and he doesn't go into this, but the practical side of this. So let's say everybody agrees with what he's saying, or at least with what we're saying about the length of time and the lack of focus from the universities on teaching, really fulfilling their role. The problem is the accreditation.
Yeah.
So you can't become a lawyer in Missouri unless you've graduated from an accredited ABA accredited law school and passed the bar. And so you can't get into an ABA accredited law school until you've got an undergraduate degree, taken the LSAT and got it admitted. So we have this whole superstructure. That's just one example. I mean, so all these degrees, if you said, hey, you know what, we're going to have an accelerated bachelor, let's say a business management degree or accounting
Hmm.
degree. I mean, accounting might be a little bit different because they actually have to know stuff. But let's just say business management, so you can be like an HR person or whatever. I mean, there's nothing that would prohibit them from having a 2 year program for that,
Right.
and you can get it done. You can learn the things you need to learn to be an effective manager in two
Hmm.
years. Well, they wouldn't be accredited to give that bachelor's degree because you wouldn't have 120 credit hours or whatever they
Right.
require.
Right.
And then you can't have a master's unless you have so many credit hours, which takes
Hmm.
so much time and it's so many weeks. And that's the back end of it. So I think there's two things going on here. One is he's right. He's talking about the philosophy behind education and higher education. What's the purpose in fulfilling that? But then, okay, if we all decided that we're going to have maybe a liberal arts school that is for this purpose, and then maybe change some of these other ones, like a biology degree, into screw this, just have it as a technical school, and so you get a biology degree, then you can get a master's or a PhD or whatever in that field, and keep it more of a technical. You're not going to be able to do that as a university because of the accreditation,
Right.
and then you won't be able to give anybody a degree. Then you don't have the
Yeah.
check, and you won't be able
Yeah.
to get a job because they say, well, you can't get a job here unless you have this degree.
Right.
And I think with the internet and AI and information being so accessible that you can learn these things without a university degree, I think you're going to see an unwinding
Hmm.
of our university system, certainly in your lifetime. I don't know if I'll live long enough to do it, but with regard to a lot of those degrees, it's going to be 2 year degrees. It's going to save people so much of their life. I mean,
Hmm.
it's such a it's such a wonderful time of your life when you're in your 20s and you're vibrant. You want to start a family or whatever. You're going to delay it
Right.
for stupid degrees. Anyway,
Right.
that's another rant.
Yeah.
But
He
he's
kind of,
right about all this
yeah,
stuff.
he absolutely is. Because he continues on in 342, where he says, so just as in the 60s, universities were devoted to removing requirements, in the 80s, when he's writing in 87, he says they are busy with attempts to put them back in, a much more difficult task. The word
Yes.
of the day is core, right? What is the core of the education? Says it's generally agreed that, quote, we went a bit far in the 60s, end quote, and that a little fine tuning has now become clearly necessary. And he says, really, the solution to this has just been he says like the difference between breadth versus openness, right? The 80s is sort of focusing on having this breadth of education. You take things from different departments to sort of build up some idea of what a core education could be. But again, it's just sort of this unfocused idea, right? Where it's now we're saying, okay, maybe you just can't be completely open. You do whatever you want. You take these courses from this department, fill out a humanities credit, get a STEM credit here. But that's still not really contributing to what you think the education is. Now it's just sort of a grab bag of different things. And I think that's still where the university is today, is that focus on breadth coupled with this sort of more modern, I think in the past like 20 years, that focus on like the complete and total comfort of all the students,
Yes.
I think has been the innovation since he's writing. And he doesn't,
Yes.
I don't think, see that quite yet, but that's something I think has come up in the past couple decades.
Yeah, 100%. And then he segues to, like the other theory. One was you have these sampling of courses. Then he
Hmm.
talks about, or you could have these composite courses, which is like man and nature or culture and the individual, which
Hmm.
really is just becomes like a very brief synopsis. You don't really get to learn
Hmm.
subjects. It's like well, you get exposed to them. Well, okay, a lot of good, but then he talks about the other solution, which I thought you might be interested, is the that has almost universally been rejected, the good old great books
Hmm.
approach to education. And I remember getting you the Harvard classes
Yeah.
from the local used bookstore here in Festus, which is no longer around. But you plowed through. I don't know if you got through all of them, but you certainly made a big dent in
Yeah.
them.
I'm still working through them. The problem is I keep finding other great books that I've interspersed with them. I haven't read them all like straight. I'll read one of the Harvard classics and I'll read like six other, classics in the meantime. So I haven't gotten through the full set. And I only have a half set. I think there's 50 total. I think that you got me like the first
Uh,
25 that they had at
yes.
the bookstore. But yeah, he says like really that's sort of the only solution that he sees, right? If you want this true liberal arts education and you want it to encompass, enough of what is important and things that aren't just wasting people's time, well, it kind of has to be this. And he says, well, I'm very aware of all of the objections. And he lists them all, right? He says it can
Right.
be amateurish. It encourages an autodidact self-assurance without competence. One cannot read all of the great books carefully. If one only reads great books, one can never know what a great as opposed to an ordinary book is. And he keeps going down this list where he's like, yeah, there's a lot of problems with it,
Yeah.
but it's so much better in terms of a university education, right? It's not better as, a technical education, but if you're looking for a university liberal arts education, that is better than any of the other solutions, whether it's just this sort of grab bag or whether it's these weird sort of composite, sort of general surface level courses. It'd be much better for students who are sort of geared to the university life to spend, 3 or 4 years just reading these great works that have informed, what our university system is. But he says that just nobody wants to do that, right? A, because I think it's a lot of work, and B, because a lot of people just don't see the importance. And he kind of goes into a little bit more of that a little bit later, and he goes down different groups of people within the university, which I thought was interesting
Yeah. Well,
about
hold
their
on.
approach to it. Yeah.
Before you get to that, I love his point. And I really appreciated him putting forth the criticisms of that approach.
Hmm.
It's not a panacea,
Right.
but he mentions them, and what I think he's right, 100% right about is he says the judicious use of great texts provide the royal road to students' hearts.
Hmm.
I think that is so true. If you really have students that are thirsty for that knowledge and the to know of the great men and women that came before in those
Hmm.
seminal works that really influenced the human history,
Yeah.
and great advances in medicine and knowledge and philosophy. That's the way to do it, and
Right.
I think students are appreciating it. So they've achieved something, which is kind of funny. I've read Aristotle,
Hmm.
I've read Plato's Republic. I've read other books that are considered great
Hmm.
by the people that
Hmm.
make these lists of great books, and so then you can say, well, yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Right. And I've met some people who have gone through specific like great book schools, St. John's College or Yeah, St. John's College, not university. I know a couple of people have been through that, and it's literally just great books program where all
Huh.
of their courses are just reading and discussing a great book,
Wow.
and similar things. And you kind of have a similar thing here down at Florida, where you have these great books and ideas majors that
Hmm.
are happening, and even that's still, I mean, kind of restricted by what the university requires from on top. So it's not sort of the
Right.
true, just purely great books. You have to take all these prereqs and everything, that are just
Right.
university
Right.
wide required. But it's like, I talk to these people, and they're some of the most passionate and like optimistic about education.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, they've seen what good education can be, or sort of this
Yeah.
in-depth great books education can be. I also like what he says. He says right before the quote that you read, he says it gives them an acquaintance with what big questions were when there were still big questions, models at the very least of how to go about answering them, and perhaps most important of all, a fund of shared experiences and thoughts on which to ground their friendships with one another.
Yeah.
Right? It gives
Yeah.
that common ground. It talks about these big questions, talks about how you might answer them. Says that's one of the big benefits, right? And that pretty much no other structure gives to students across the whole university.
Yeah. And so then he goes into, like, you started to talk about, like,
Yeah.
okay, well, why hasn't this happened? Or
Hmm.
why does it no longer exist? He talks about the three great parts of the contemporary university. I
Hmm.
think he's dead on in this, where he
Yeah.
talks about natural scientists, and they're benevolent towards other studies, but they don't want to have any. They don't want to have to be bothered by it. It seems
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and then that's okay for all them. It's kind
Hmm.
of nice as a hobby, but what's really important
Right.
to them is their fields of study and the
Right.
technical knowledge and proficiency and all that.
Yeah, because he says like even like these scientists that are considered part of the great books, like they don't even really think you need to learn that, right? You don't really need to read Bacon and Descartes and Hume and Kant and Marx or Galileo and Newton, right? Those are just kind of things in the past. Surely we've built on them, but we don't
Right.
really need to read them anymore because we've advanced so far enough that our research is sort of completely separate from all of those questions that they were asking.
Right.
And so it's just
Right. That-
completely
that-
removed. It's like you guys can do that, but we don't want you to make us, have any part in that, right? That's for
right.
you guys to
Right.
do, and you're
Yeah.
fine to do that.
And he's right. He's right
Hmm.
about that. And then he talks about social scientists are generally hostile because the classical tests deal with things that freed them from the shackles of earlier thought to
Hmm.
become truly scientific. And so the social scientists don't like, and of course they're transgressive now. If
Hmm.
you it's not contemporary enough for them, and they just don't value it.
Right.
And I'm sorry if you had a comment on that. No.
Well, I liked his story where he says, "I remember the professor who taught the introductory graduate courses in social science methodology, a famous historian, responding scornfully and angrily to a question I naively put to him about Thucydides with, quote, Thucydides was a fool."
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's really the attitude. It's like, well, they were asking sort of the same questions that we are in the social sciences, but they were doing it wrong and they were stupid.
Yeah.
We can't have, students going back to those old, ridiculous ways, where they thought the wrong things back then.
Yeah. And it's so weird to me that people nowadays will talk about, like, great men of history and just disparage them, like, saying that I always mispronounce his name.
Thucydides.
Thucydides was a fool. I've actually got his book downstairs, and one of the things I need to read. But I don't, I don't know who this particular professor was. But after that, after he's gone, whoever this person was that says Thucydides is a fool, nobody will remember that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to what?
Yeah.
He's a fool compared to who? You?
Hmm.
Man, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's just that hubris, the arrogance that you can do it better. And then the third category of people in the
Right.
universities are the
I was just
humanists.
going to interrupt you because I was just pulling off my copy of like the first half of Thucydides' histories in Greek because I have that sitting on my shelf. Haven't read through it yet, but I own
I
it.
have what is it? It's a Thucydides, his commentary about war. I don't think it's that
Well,
book.
it's his history of the Peloponnesian War. That
Yeah, I
that's
know,
his
but
it's his text, really.
yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah,
I'm trying
I
to think,
think
'cause I
that's all
haven't
we
read
have of
it
him. Yeah, that he's written.
yet. Well, I haven't read it yet, so I don't
Well,
know.
there you go. There you go.
And then the third category that the author describes are the humanists, which you'd expect, as the author mentioned, you'd expect that they would be in support of it.
Hmm.
And some of them are, but there's a big division. He says, um, uh, It just says that they just don't support it because they don't believe in it.
Right.
Basically, it just seems so counterintuitive that the humanists of all would want to study the great books, but they
Hmm.
just
Yeah, I like what he says here. He says some humanities disciplines are just crusty specialties that, although they depend on the status of classic books for their existence, are not really interested in them in their natural state. Much
yeah
philology actually calls out philology. Or much philology, for example, is concerned with the languages, but not what is said with them, and
yeah
will and can do nothing to support their own infrastructure. I think that's very true, right? If you look at linguistics programs now, which aren't quite the same as philology, which is more so the historical side of things, but linguists really do not care about what is written in these languages that they're studying. They're not really care about what the words are. It's looking past, the words and the text and well, how is the structure of the language, right? And it's like, well, if we didn't have these things recorded, especially if you're doing historical linguistics, right? And something about these were worth preserving over the
yeah.
years. You don't really want to sit and consider why that is, and it might be an interesting side project, but it's not the main focus.
I
Right.
just I find that very odd that
Hmm.
if you're studying the language,
Hmm.
that you wouldn't want to study the literature that came from that language. I
Yeah.
mean, it seems so weird to me.
Well, some are. It depends. I mean, you have like the language documentation people, which there's still some good work done there, and they're very passionate. A lot of them are about collecting religious texts from these people, that otherwise would never have been written down and things like that. But if you look at the people who are linguists and study, Latin and Greek and things like that, and looking at sort of the development of languages, they don't really care about the works themselves, right? They view it more as just a repository of linguistic information,
Hmm.
and that's really the focus there. And maybe they care about it on the side, like I said, as a hobby, but
Yeah.
it's not present like in their research of like why this text, and things like that. It's curious. It's really
Well,
interesting.
I guess as long as they, it's like for me, it's like somebody that works at a bookstore doesn't like to read.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I've never seen. I mean, almost everybody that works at a bookstore or a library loves to read now. Nowadays, they like to only read certain
Mhm.
things. They have a banned books display, but they will not have all the
Hmm.
banned books.
Right.
The books that would get them in trouble with their
Yeah.
friend.
And it kind of reminds me, I had a classmate, it was very nice of him actually. He saw me reading Penguin Classics are like, really sort of high quality considered, paperbacks. And I was reading a Penguin Classics, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy just in the minutes before class started. He saw me, he says, oh, what are you reading? And I'm reading this. He says, oh, I have some Penguin Classics that I've read through and have just been kind of sitting on my shelf. And I was, just going to give them to somebody. And I was going to drop them off in like the linguistics graduate lounge. I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I'll take them if you're interested. And he's like, yeah, I was going to put them there. But then I was like, I don't know if any linguists would really want to read these, if they just want to read like the linguistics text. And I'm like, really? People wouldn't want to read these books. I have like a copy of Xenophon's, Persian Expedition. You had some like Penguin Classics, like the Norse sagas and stuff like that. And some people have that sense where it's just like, do the linguists really want to read these? They don't seem interested in these sorts of
Yeah,
things, these classics. And it's like, it's strange that
yeah,
he had that same reation too. And I'm
yeah.
very glad it was very nice of him to give me those books. He gave me like
Yeah,
five
'cause
books
you
or
need
so.
more books.
'Cause I
Yeah.
need more books. Well, the Friends of the Library book sale is next week too. With the warehouse full of books that they sell for like 50 cents a piece. So I'll
Oh,
have many, many more books come next week.
I just don't know. You'll never have enough time to read them all.
Wow. I'll have time to
Okay.
read some of them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, of course, I don't know why I'm criticizing you. I have at least 30 books
Yeah, I know.
to read. I've got that book tree that is full, it's like a shelf of at least 30 books. And well, I have to finish them.
Yes.
Three of them that I'm reading right now. And
Yes.
I've gotten away from finishing one and then moving to the other. And I need to
Mhm.
get back to that because otherwise it takes me forever. Anyway,
Right. But then
so I
he
think we're
moves
going to the
on.
next
Yeah, he
section.
moves on to the next section, the decomposition of the university. And he kind of goes back to Cornell and he's looking at these, three groups again, where he says they really kind of all acted characteristically to this sort of student uprising that happened. He says the natural scientists were above the battle, an island unto themselves that did not feel threatened. He says, well, why should we care about this? And I like this story that he tells. He says they were walking to this meeting where the faculty eventually capitulated to the students. He's telling this on 348. He says, a
Yeah.
truly disgraceful event, a microcosm of cowardly acquiescence to the establishment of tyranny. He's very passionate about this. He says
Yes.
he was in the company of a friend who had to suffer the humiliation of leaving his home and hiding out with his family after receiving explicit threats. I heard a professor of biology loudly asking, perhaps for our benefit, do these social scientists really believe there is any danger? My
Yeah,
friend looked at me sadly and said, with colleagues like that, you don't need enemies.
for sure.
And he says just some of the professors are so far removed from what's actually going on campus. Like, wow, there's really no problems here. And it's just the students, doing their old protest thing. Right? And this is
Yeah.
walking past a guy who was explicitly threatened and had to move houses.
Yeah, and he mentions like I don't know if it's here, but he talks about the diversity, diversifying in the I think it's later, lowering the standards, for equity.
Hmm.
And I think it ties in with that same philosophy that it doesn't affect us. And he says here on 348, these scientists were not asked to change one thing in their studies, their classes, or the laboratories, so they opted out.
Right.
Just like, yeah, go do what you want to do. Let's just solve this thing and
Hmm.
capitulate to these people so I can get back to my lab. But the author had a premonition here about the diversity push, and that the natural scientists, like the mathematicians and the physicists, were assuming that it would always be meritocracy in
Hmm.
those fields because math is math, science is science, and so they expected the social scientists to maybe change their standards to diversify the
Hmm.
university at large, and they never thought it would come back and impact their field of study.
Yeah.
And boy, has it ever, as
Hmm.
far as tenure track, getting jobs, and the administration of the universities, those kind of DEI policies have really had a huge impact on
Yeah.
the universities and on
Hmm.
those. Well, probably the people that he's talking about probably retired and didn't see
Yeah.
the full effect of what they ended up.
Yeah, that's on 351 where he
Yeah.
says like they paid lip service to all these sorts of ideas. He says in the dilemma that faced them, mathematicians wanted, for example, to see more blacks and women hired, but could not find nearly enough competent ones. They in effect said that the humanists and social scientists should hire them. Believing that
Yes.
there are no real standards outside of the natural scientists, they assumed that adjustments could easily be made.
Yeah.
With profoundest irresponsibility, scientists went along with various aspects of affirmative action, assuming, for example, that any minority students admitted without proper qualifications would be taken care of by other departments if they did not do well in science. And of course, that didn't
Yes.
happen. And that's
Yes.
really related to this conversation he has a little bit prior to that, where he's saying it's just this idea that they are completely isolated from the rest of the university. So what do we care, right? That has no bearing on us, and that relates to the problems of the university not having a clear goal. But once it
Yep.
does come back to bite them, that no, you are, part of the same university, the same one thing as these other departments. Any change in a different department is going to affect you down the line, even if it's not an immediate change.
Yeah, and he correctly describes them as believing that the only connection they had to the rest of the university is just administrative,
Right.
to management and PR, HR
Hmm.
and benefits and that kind of stuff. But they completely segregated themselves out, or tried to, or imagined that they were, and wouldn't
Hmm.
be affected like everybody else from whatever policies are enacted, and that separation and that lack of defense for study of the truth and enforcing certain standards, certainly came back and got them.
Hmm. Yeah, and then he turns to the humanities, where he says, like, these are where the most fanatical supporters of all these student movements were. And he says, man, it really came back to bite them.
Yes,
Because he says, they all capitulated with these things or supported these things. He says, the humanities that have suffered the most as a result of the 60s. Son
yes.
352 says, the lack of student interest, the near disappearance of language study, the vanishing of jobs for PhDs,
Mhm.
the lack of public sympathy came from the overturning of the old order where their place was assured. They have gotten what they deserved, but we have unfortunately all lost. He says a
Yes,
lot of this is tied to this, real, aggressive attitude towards the great books or towards the classics, where it's this
yes,
complete removal of these things. It's like we need to argue against these. We need to be forward thinking. That's the future of the humanities. But if your entire field, your entire broader sort of field above all of these other fields that you're focusing on is dependent upon these things, if you're attacking them, you're going to be completely run out of the university. You're going to
yes.
have no jobs, no opportunities available. You have really killed yourselves, and that's why he says they've gotten what they deserve, but we have unfortunately all lost. We're all worse off for that. With the humanities taking up smaller and smaller portions of the university and doing more and more irrelevant research, and
Yep,
just kind of saying nothing at all. He says like that used to be the core of the university, and now that's
right.
completely lost.
Yep. Yeah, and people aren't going into those fields of study,
Right?
and the ones that are
Are
competing.
crazy.
Well, or they're if they excel, there are fewer jobs because fewer
Right?
people are going to those areas of study. It's killing itself.
Hmm.
Hopefully there'll be a turnaround here soon, but
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough, and the author does a great job of
Yeah,
describing that. You know,
yeah,
that they got what they deserved. You know,
right.
but it's like, oh, but we all get, we got hurt
Yeah.
too, or the collateral
Yeah.
damage.
Yeah, because then he turns, in this last part of the chapter, he says this left the social sciences as the battleground. If the natural sciences kind of check out, the humanities are all full force, in support of these things. Really, the fight is over where the social sciences are. He says both the
Yeah,
point of attack and the only place where any kind of stand was made. They were the newest part of the university, the part that could least boast of great past achievement or contribution to the store of human wisdom. He says kind of as a result of that, they're seen as the most attackable. They're the most easy to change in some ways.
mm,
And he tells this story. He says this was in social science that the radicals first struck. This is on 354. He says a group of black activists disrupted the class of an economics teacher, then proceeded to the chairman's office and held him and his secretary, who suffered from heart disease, hostage for 13 hours. The charge, of course, was that the teacher was racist and using a Western standard for judgment of the efficiency of African economic performance. The students were praised for calling the problem to the attention of the authorities. The chairman refused to proffer charges against them, and the teacher disappeared miraculously from campus, never to be seen again.
yeah,
He says that was really typical, right? You have all these historians, these economists, where it's like these were the targets of attack. He says historians were being asked to rewrite the history of the world and of the United States in particular to show that nations were always conspiratorial systems of domination and exploitation. And he says the same thing about psychologists, the psychological damage done by inequality. Political scientists urged to interpret the North Vietnamese as nationalist and to remove the stigma of totalitarianism from the Soviet Union. Right? He says these weren't really coming from the academics themselves sometimes. These were pressures put in from outside, right? Contrary to the humanities, which supported it full force, some of these people were kind of forced into it. They were the sort of the line of attack, and that's where you start to see things get really, really ugly, and where some, kind of opposition was made. Where he says, some of this suited many social scientists, but a new, tougher strain emerged out of the struggle. Some saw that their objectivity was threatened, and without respect and protection for scholarly inquiry, any one of them might be put at risk.
yeah,
I think he's right that that's like the only hope for a lot of these people. If you have this sort of sustained attack on your field, is for them to band together and say, well, if you're attacking objectivity here, that means that we're all next,
yeah.
right? And that none of us are safe if the attack is on just objectivity itself. If it's all these political things, if it's all these very relativist things, then my job is not secure. My education, is not secure. My entire field is not secure.
Yeah, and he doesn't address it, but practically speaking, what you're really talking about are bullies.
Yeah.
And the only way you stop a bully is, and I don't mean this physically, but you punch them in the nose. I mean that I don't mean that as a, like you physically punch these people in the nose, but you take some immediate reaction,
Hmm.
negative reaction to them, and punish them.
Right.
And you're seeing, these disciplinary actions being taken now in some universities, and
Right.
stopping them cold in their tracks.
Yeah.
But if you don't, it'll just get worse and worse and worse, and it'll
Right.
snowball. I love how I'm going to go back a little bit
Sure.
because it's my favorite, might be my favorite quote of the book on 353. He's talking about the humanists just surrendering
Hmm.
and going along with all this stuff. And he says, humanists ran like lemmings into the sea, thinking they would refresh and revitalize themselves in it. They drowned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%. They
Yeah.
just completely lost all academic freedom,
Hmm.
and they gave in to the mob, and they thought, oh, but this is going to be great. It'll renew our areas of study. No, the way you renew and revitalize, your field of study is to do it based upon the timeless ideals of the university that existed 100 years ago.
Right.
You don't have to have the same values, like as far as contemporary political thought, but you have to have a belief that there is something called the truth, and that the
Hmm.
university is a place where you're supposed to be seeking it, without favor, without a bias, and try to do that in all areas. And this kind of political pressure on universities to silence people that have heterodox views
Hmm.
kills it. And
Yeah.
for a university president, or anybody who's employed at a university, not to see that for what it was is just crazy.
Right.
And it's only crazy left wing thought that is defended.
Hmm.
Like, and some of it's really vile.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you're seeing, the difficulty they're having now is like these teachers that made crazy statements about Charlie Kirk's death.
Hmm.
or the attempted assassinations of Trump, is they've lost the footing about free speech codes, free speech on universities. So they're all of them have had a practice of disciplining people for what they called violent speech,
Hmm.
which is wishing bad things on other people and
Hmm.
enforced pretty harshly against anybody right of center. And so they're left toothless in defending some left wing lunatic who said it was great that Charlie Kirk got murdered.
Right.
And they have a really hard time with it.
Yeah.
They
But you
should.
you do see it because I mean it's even in other things where it's not explicitly calls for violence or things like that. But you were there when we went into the linguistics building. We saw the
Right.
flyers on teachers' doors for the Marxist reading group. A lot of those have been taken down.
Crazy.
It,
Yeah.
it seems like, but it makes me think like people would fight tooth and nail to defend. Well, that's just academic freedom. They should be allowed to teach whatever they want. If I were to go around putting up flyers for, I don't know, some sort of like Catholic, social teaching reading group, talking about, the evils of abortion and things like that. Well, that'd be dangerous, right? That'd
Right.
be, well, you're trying to enforce your views upon these people, and that's, you're not open to these ideas and things like that, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's an even milder things like that, where you're just not allowed to bring up these topics
Yeah.
in the academy, and the entire opposite side is very, very much encouraged and welcome to.
Yeah. It's I don't know. But yeah, it's funny he's writing this in the 1980s and it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was a well-known publication way back in
Hmm.
the so but I think it's starting to make headway against it. But man, it's been their march through the institutions
Yeah,
has moved forward unabated.
yeah,
And surprisingly, the only one that's doing anything about it is Trump, who is historically like the most liberal or left-leaning Republican president in my lifetime.
yeah.
If you look at the positions that he holds,
Hmm.
he's not the typical right-wing guy,
Right.
and he's the only one that's actually doing something to preserve the universities have freedom of thought and freedom of speech. It's a wild world we live in.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes.
Do you have any other final thoughts?
No.
All right.
I think that was my final thought,
Oh,
and
that's good.
I should not
Um,
try to say any others because then that would dilute the meaning of the word final.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, I think we'll have one more episode in this season,
Yeah.
finishing up this chapter and then reading and discussing the afterword from Andrew Ferguson. And so we'll see how the book ends, what his final conclusion is, if there's any hope that he can point to, because it's been a real downward trend throughout this book, it seems like.
Yeah.
But we'll see if he can bring it back to what can be done going forward.
Well, it's kind of like a cancer diagnosis.
Hmm.
It's important to know, and then you figure out the treatment plan.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Just hope it's not terminal.
That's true.
Yeah, we're getting close with these universities.
Yeah, that's
Holy
true.
God.
That's true. All right. Well,
Put it
this
on
is
hospice. Some
well,
of them, some of these universities aren't going to survive,
yeah. Oh, I know. Some of them will
especially
be going.
especially the AI world, man.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Well, this has been season 12, episode 17 of Unlimited Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
Still Mark Bishop.
You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions.
What's our book for next season? And have you suggested any swag?
Oh, I haven't, but I'm thinking the Republic. I think we should read the Republic. Um,
Right. Okay.
I think it's only 10 books, so it'd only be like a 10
Okay.
episode
That'd be
season,
good.
so we can
Yeah.
go through that one pretty quick, I would hope.
Okay.
That's what I think. I think that'd be good.
All right.
We'll have
Which
some
which
interesting.
translation? Because I'll have to. You already have. I
Yeah,
mean,
let's.
I have a couple of versions that
Yeah,
we.
I also have a couple versions. Let's go with Allan Bloom's. It looks like this.
Uh,
The Republic of Plato by Allan Bloom.
Thick.
Or we can do the Penguin. I've read the Penguin Classics one. That one's pretty
Okay,
good.
Allan Bloom. I'll get that. Is it paperback? Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
going to be too expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what all of our listeners can look forward to in a couple weeks.